to recognize that this will be a high holidays like no other, that it really will be an experience very different to any we've had before, and in no aspect will it be more different than in our relationship with prayer. Um, that this really will be a very different kind of prayer experience for us. Imperfect, frustrating, potentially, for us as well as for you. I mean, I think one of the things, for us as clergy has been just the challenge of leading tefillah without a congregation, and that lack of call and response. But we have learned a lot about how to do it, how to make it work better, despite all of those frustrations. So, with your permission, what I was going to do this evening is just take you through a PowerPoint of some of the things that we've learned. And at various points, we'll stop and just kind of have the opportunity to have the conversation together, as we're all on one screen, about some of the things that might resonate, some of the things you might disagree with, I would expect, and just to think together about some of these challenges. So, all being well, when I press this button, you should all now be able to see something that says how to be in shul from home, what we've learned so far. And this really is kind of the learning that we've developed together. And when I say together, also in conversation with many of you as well. Um, so let me begin just by naming the thing which needs to be named. And I think there's a real power in naming this. Certainly for me, over the course of the last few months, there's been a real power in naming the challenge of now. Um, and the challenge is that our prayer life is not the same as it normally is and as we want it to be. Um, but just because it's not the same and imperfect doesn't mean that it can't still be good, a different level of good, or a different type of good, but requiring something different of us. So, sorry. So the first thing is to name the loss. I think for me, there's been something very powerful about naming the loss. Our prayer life is primarily as a communal experience. So we are experiencing a sense of loss, many of us, of not being able to be with one another in prayer. Um, I feel it in particular musically, the lack of call and response, um, the lack of harmony, but also in that fundamental social connection that we have when we are in prayer with one another. Our prayer is not a private thing. When they started opening places of worship for private prayer, we all kind of looked at each other and said, "What do we do with that? Doesn't compute." So there is a real sense of loss, and I think it's important that we name that. And we are naming it in trying to create as many in-person experiences as we can around the High Holy Days. So if you have not had the chance, this is the one plug, I promise you. If you've not had the chance to sign up for one of the in-person tefillot and feel able to, it really is a profoundly moving experience to be able to be together in prayer again. Um, so the Shabbat Shacharit that I had the privilege of leading, there was a moment, page 199, Baruch Adonai Le'olam, Amen v'Amen. And for 147 days, I had to say both bits of it. And then there was this extraordinary moment where I said Baruch Adonai Le'olam, and other people said Amen v'Amen, and it took my breath away. It really reminded me of how powerful that moment can be, and that call and response can be. But we won't be able to have that for much of the High Holy Days. We will have it as a much more private and personal experience. So what that means is that we have to be thoughtful and intentional in a different way to create those meaningful experiences for ourselves. It demands of us that we are proactive and intentional in a way that's not normally required of us in our prayer lives. And the way I'm thinking about this is as a religious task. Actually, this is a job of religious work that we need to do to think about how we approach it, and to recognize that it is still an important thing that we do. So for me, and these are very personal observations, one of the things that's very important is that my prayer life continues to be a fixed point. So I think particularly early on, it felt like a sort of tent peg. to hold up the rest of the tent that was blowing in the wind. And there's something very powerful about the fact that, throughout this, even through all of this, um, our prayer has transcended the present experience. That is, whatever else is happening, this has still been happening. The thing you have been able to know throughout all of this is that at 6:30 on a Friday and 10:30 on a Saturday, you can log on and there will be a member of clergy on the Elif Bima leading tefillah, um, as a fixed point in a very uncertain time. And for us as well, that's felt very powerful. Um, the other thing that I think is really important as we approach the High Holy Days, in particular, and these are kind of unstructured observations, I grant you. We'll get onto some more structured ones, I hope, um, is that this is not permanent. And I think it's really important that one of the things we recognize is that there is no sense in which anything we are doing right now is setting precedents for the future. So I am not living any kind of vision of what tefillah will look like in 2021 right now. Um, what I'm doing is living through the present and the present experience that we have and trying to make the very best of it that we can. So my opening is just to, I think one of the things that we need to do in order to make the High Holy Days meaningful is to be emotionally honest about this reality that we are pining for a different kind of life, a different kind of prayer life, but that pining is not enough. We also have to do something about it, and be intentional in a different way, and recognize that there is much about it that is still good, and that which is not good is impermanent. There will come a time where we will be together in our Beit Tefillah praying together as we dream of. And it may not be soon, but it will definitely be happening. Um, I'm just going to stop the share for a moment, just to see if anyone wants to make any observations or thoughts before I get onto some more of the tachlis of what it means to be kind of intentional and thoughtful about our prayer lives in this situation. Then we will go back to the tachlis. So, so what does it mean for us to be um, really thoughtful? This idea of being thoughtful and intentional to create meaningful experiences for ourselves. Some of this will be obvious to many of you because many of you have learned these stuff for yourselves already. So, I think the first thing is we need to think about physical space and how we make our homes a sacred space for prayer. So really giving thought to the physical space that we're using for prayer is important. And I've attended lots of tefillah as a participant as well as a service leader, and have learned things about what will make it feel better. Um, so, for example, if possible, it's better not to use the same space that we work in to make it feel like a different sort of a of a life experience. So I am sat here in my work chair. Just over there, I don't know if you can see that, is the chair in the window. And what I've learned is that if I want to be a participant in something, I'm going to go and sit in that chair. And if I'm teaching or studying or in a meeting, I'm in this chair. And just that transformation of a meter and a half, a different kind of chair, changes my relationship with the experience that I'm having. Another observation, and this is an observation in part from watching some of you. I'm sorry, we observe you as much as you observe us when we're leading tefillah together, is not to use a space where there are other demands of you. So the example that I give is if you're trying to pray in the kitchen on Friday nights and also making dinner at the same time, then it is impossible that making dinner will not interfere with your prayer life. And of course, one of the observations I would make is that we can see you go and check the oven, and it changes. So that interdependence that we have is real, even though we are in different spaces from one another. Um, and of course, one of the other demands that life makes of us is the other kinds of distractions that we have, including other electronics. So, as we were speaking earlier, one of the things that Robert said was that he's started using the YouTube because it allows him to do it on the television, which means that he can put down his mobile phone and his iPad or his laptop. And actually, that's a very good example of the sort of thing we need to learn and do in order to make this prayer life better. This is all going to go online as a PDF quite soon. So I'm just watching Gail take a picture of her screen. Um, so one of the things that we are very keen to do is to make sure that for the High Holy Days, everyone who wants to and doesn't already have has the ability to have a mahsor in your hand, so that you can turn off, put the TV on or put the iPad on the other side of the room, and not also be trying to use another device where you're also trying to follow in the Siddur and those sorts of things as well. So if you check in the weekly emails, there are going to be a number of occasions where you can come into the synagogue and we will be there. And as well as just having the lovely opportunity to say hello to real people in person, we'll also be able to give you a copy of the Mahsor to borrow, which will allow you to use it. And so a little bit of thought in advance about which tefillot you'll be attending, if you're going to need the Erev services and the Rosh Hashanah morning services. And so on Yom Kippur, we'll be using the old Mahsor, though some might choose to follow online. And on Rosh Hashanah, we'll have copies of the draft Mahsurim for those who want them. So you can actually have a copy in your hand and remove some of the other distractions and electronics. And of course, there are other ways you can do that by, for example, turning off some of the notifications and announcements that you might get on your phone, so that if you are following on a phone or iPad or or a laptop, not having your email on at the same time. So my rule of thumb is, if you wouldn't do it in shul, or if the person next to you doing it in shul would really annoy you, then probably it's something to not do in our tefillah. The other thing about making our homes a sacred space is something about how tidy they can be, making it feel special. So some of you will have seen that Jonathan Romain did his own version of something like this. And one of the things he really emphasized was the aesthetics of the space. Having a tablecloth and some flowers, really making it feel like a special space. For me, I think there's something as simple as just decluttering a little bit, not having those distractions in the space that you're in. And another observation which Jonathan makes, which I've taken because I think it's really helpful, is sitting in a decent chair, in an upright chair. I watch. If you are watching it as if you're watching TV, then we are watching you watching TV, watching us watching TV, and that interdependence that we experience together is one of the challenges that we have. So the first thing I think in terms of how to make this really work is giving real thought to the physical space that we inhabit for our prayer lives, and that being something we have to be intentional about. And especially intentional about for these High Holy Days, in order that we can come in with the sort of mental state that we need to have. We're going to talk more about that kind of mental state, that way of making transition. But again, I'm just going to stop in case there's anyone who has any other thoughts or observations or things you've learned about the physical space of prayer at home. It would be great to hear things that you have worked well for people as they've joined, and things that have clearly been a challenge. David, you're going to have to. Can you unmute? I can unmute you. There you go. How about that?
Okay. Hi. And first of all, thanks to you and all your colleagues for everything that you've put on. It's been terrific, and particularly given that you, as you say, can't see us. I think what you just said about the creating a special space is helpful, because I've found I had a tension in that I go to lots of Zoom meetings during the week with work. And so when Shabbat came along, I had a real tension. On the one hand, I wanted to create something different and not use the computer. But on the other hand, like everyone else, I wanted the connection with the community. So I think what you say about creating a separate space is really good. And I just wonder, it may not be that everyone wants to do this, but I just wonder whether spending a couple of minutes reading one of those sort of more contemplative paragraphs in the Reform Siddur to sort of prepare one's mind before one logs on to Zoom. And not everyone will want to do it, but I think I might try it.
So we're going to go over to in the next slide in the PowerPoint. I'm going to talk about some of those kind of cavanaughs, some of that mental transition that we might use, and some ways we might approach that. Because I think you're right, David. I think it's more than just physical space. It's also our kind of the mental clutter we bring in as well. Robert.
Thanks, Josh. The other thing that I was going to say was, and you know, everybody may well appreciate this, if you're listening on Zoom, your computer and your phone sometimes has lousy sound. By getting a USB lead and plugging it into your TV, you can completely transform what would be coming through on your computer screen.
Great. Thank you. And it changes the. So my concern about TV is this has been such a weird experience watching you, watching us, watching you, this whole thing. But actually, sometimes I've seen members of the congregation engaging with what we're doing as if it's a television program. So I think one of the things I would suggest is if you are going to watch it on TV, don't sort of slouch in the sofa as if it's TV, but to still be in an upright chair. It is as much a challenge that prayer life should be like work. It's as much a challenge as it should be like vegging out in front of Netflix, right? That's equally not what we're doing when we're doing the exercise, the work of our prayer together. Are there any other thoughts or observations as we think this stuff through together? Henry.
Do you have a view on virtual backgrounds?
My only view is that Loretta needs to stop disappearing into hers. I think it has been for all of us. I think this has been like a shared thing, is the experience of watching Loretta slowly disappear into the background and then come back again.
Cheshire cat.
So look, I think I think the serious challenge is how do we make sure that as well as thinking about our own needs in prayer, we're also thinking about those of other people, right? And so, quite early on, there was a member of the shul. I can say this because I won't say who it is, but there's a member of the shul who was on the phone the whole way through a Friday night service, and the experience for us was, as service leaders, our covenant, our ability to focus on what we were doing was completely transformed by that. So I'm being silly. Loretta kind of coming in and out is not the same. Of course it's not. But there is that thing of really being aware of what our doing does to others, and to be aware of that as we think about our setup and how we are. Of course, it also depends what the background is. I quite enjoyed the series of different synagogues. I think it was synagogues that we saw the cons praying from. I quite liked Peter Backman's window that he sat in for a while. So there is also that thing of we are real people coming in relationship with each other, and there's something very special about seeing those things that are special about one another as well. So I don't know. Let's keep going, and then we can keep coming back to some of these questions together. So I think one of the things is around space, physical space, but I think there is also something about being intentional about how we are and how we come into the experience. I think what is most challenging about being on Zoom and being on YouTube, whatever it is, as a lived experience, is how to make it feel like it's different and special. Exactly that challenge that David identified. So I think for me, there's been something about making sure it's a different experience. So thinking about what to wear, even so it feels like a service. I think there's something very valuable. I mean, again, referring back to David's observation about trying to avoid screen time for a period before coming to prayer to counter that screen fatigue. So it's not always possible on Erev Shabbat. Of course, it isn't, because you lots of people have been at work all day. But to make sure that the first thing you do on a Saturday morning or on, Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur morning is not to have a Zoom call with somebody else or to go to a meeting or to watch a video, but the first screen experience you have is the screen experience of prayer. That you can kind of come into it almost kind of unsullied by the experience of what else you've been doing. I'm incredibly relaxed normally about people coming in late. I think there is something about the shared experience of starting together about Zoom in a way which is slightly different to being in person. I haven't quite worked it out yet, but it feels like there's something there, something tangible there that makes a difference. And maybe we need to get better at naming that starting thing, not just singing Matovu and saying hello, hello, we're together, but actually thinking about how do we ritualize the beginning of online prayer. I'm not quite sure how to do it as Shliach Tzibur, but I think there's something we can really think about for ourselves. So I am very conscious to make sure I wear talit when I'm joining tefillah in the morning as a viewer, as an online presence, and to say the blessing out loud, to really make it a statement of kavanah to join tefillah, wearing talit and wearing kippah as well. There's something about kind of naming for ourselves that this is a service, like making sure that we kind of tell ourselves that we are going into a different kind of space and that we are doing something different. David spoke about some of those meditative passages. I think there's something about kind of the kavanah of sitting down and saying hineni, like metaphorically or actually, here I am encountering this. One of the things that we'll release over the next couple of weeks is a special kavanah for people to say before they sit down for prayer on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur morning. So it's something to watch out for. We're just trying to rewrite there's a Shliach Tzibur's prayer on Yom Kippur. It's the one time the Shliach Tzibur has a prayer that's just for them, but we're going to rewrite it so it's something that each of us can say as we sit down. Hineni, here I am. I'm ready to encounter this experience in a different kind of way. And much as it's outside of my kind of cultural space, I think a lot of the physical stuff that is around sort of the world of mindfulness meditation is actually very helpful in this. So really kind of making sure that we are sitting and feeling our physical presence, putting our feet on the floor, thinking about our body, the sorts of things which I would not normally do. I'm normally kind of head up, not body. Body's not kind of my thing really, but actually the encounter with this experience has made me much more aware of my physical presence and much more aware of my physical comfort and discomfort. And, I think there's something about planting oneself somehow. And part of that also is around facing east. Or being aware of where east is, being somehow oriented for prayer in a way which articulates that this is a prayerful experience rather than just facing the screen. And it may be that alone forces us to move the screen into a different kind of a place and zone. Should I keep going? Is there an opportunity for people to share if there's other thoughts anyone has at this point? You know me, I can monologue. So, Brenda, are you waving? Great.
My family's always laughed at me since lockdown. Every Saturday, every Shabbat, I put on a dress, which I haven't worn for the whole week. And they all think it's very funny that I changed specially to go on Zoom. But it seems I'm going to shul, so I need to get properly dressed. So that's my way of getting into Shabbat. Great.
Right. I think there is that thing of how do we demarcate this as different to the rest of our secular mundane lives when we are doing it in the same space as we are living those secular mundane lives, where we don't have the luxury of coming into what we identify as sacred space. And that demands a level of intentionality from us. So they should not be laughing at you. They should be admiring the fact that you're making a positive, intentional cover. Like it's a kavanah, right? It's a statement of intentionality, which is the thing that our prayer life demands of us. Henry, Loretta.
It's me,
Loretta.
actually. It's me.
Hello.
And perhaps that's something that we can do at the beginning of the service. I know we do it, perhaps a bit more emphasis on that. Acknowledging how much effort we are all making, how we're all in this together. I know it's trite, but we are all in this together. Acknowledging the special effort we're making, the kavanah, the intentionality and the specialness of it at this time. In addition to the usual matovu, actually making it a supra special acknowledgement, if you like. Something it is.
Yeah, I think as this has moved on, I think there are things that we can definitely learn about how we, Aleph clergy, rabbis generally, can do this better. I think really naming some of this stuff much more explicitly, I think collectively is going to be important as we really kind of go into this more and more.
And that, sorry.
Go on.
And we are feeling as well. So it's a shared, you're simply vocalizing what
Right.
we're all feeling, I think. And it's a shared experience.
Right, and so one of the really interesting things to me, I mean, this is not my therapy session, but one of the very interesting things for me has been my prayer life is normally a shared. I'm normally doing the same thing as the people with whom I'm praying, right? I'm shliach tzibor. I'm not a performer. I'm now in a world in which I am. The gap between my prayer experience and your prayer experience is bigger than it's ever been, because what I'm doing is something so different, and so different to what I normally do. And maybe we just haven't been explicit enough about that, actually named that at the beginning of tefillah enough for one another. So I'll definitely think about how we do that the high days. Are there any other thoughts or observations? Then we're going to launch back into the PowerPoint.
Have I?
Hi, who's that?
Anthony,
Hi, Anthony.
I was going to say, what about, I've been listening on Zoom on the phone, but I've got to get the matzahs, the matzah, the modern matzah, which you've just written, by the Reform. And also just to get your head around it when you're on your own, really.
Right. So I think, certainly in terms of the prayer book, I think, Anthony, we're very keen to make sure that everyone who wants to has a physical copy of the liturgy in front of them for the High Holy Days. So there are going to be lots of opportunities to come in and pick one up and say hello to us, members of the team, to pick up the books that you
Need, yeah.
I think it's really important that we all have that book in our hands, that we feel that thing in our hands. If you are joining us only with Zoom, only with the phone, only with the audio, I think it's particularly challenging for you in that way. I think one of the things that matters to me is that that we know that you're there. And that your presence is felt. So I think one of the things Zoom does is it allows us to see and be seen, and to know that we are present. And I think YouTube, we don't know that you're there, but we sort of know. And on the audio, I think one of the things to know is we know you're there, and that you are appreciated as present in our praying community, even though you can't see us and we can't see you. Okay, let's keep going.
Can I ask how prayer books might be delivered to people who seriously can't get to synagogue?
So everyone who is has a buddy in the synagogue, their buddy has been asked to phone them. So that's 400 households, 300 and something people, 400 people. Their buddy has been asked to phone them to speak with them about what they have and what they don't have. And then we've got a bunch of people who are going to deliver prayer books for us to all of those guys who need. And we've got the amazing A-Lift cycling community who are going to keep doing the amazing work that they've been doing as well of making deliveries for us. Everyone who's one of those in one of those categories is also going to receive a special package from us, which includes honey cake and honey. And so there's lots of people who've been baking over the course of the last few weeks. And I think there was, though I was away last week, I think there was supposed to be something in around Alyth asking for driving volunteers to step in as well to help with those deliveries as well. So the buddy system has still been working incredibly well throughout to make sure that we're enabling people to get the Jewish life that they need, to support them through that. Obviously, you just need to let us know if there are people who are falling through the cracks. Make sure that your phone, the special care line we set up on that first couple of weeks into March still gets regular calls through the day. So we're really pleased that we're continuing to be able to support people. Okay, I want to talk about actually a little bit about what Anthony just spoke to, which is what does it mean to be on your own in this. So I think one of the other things we need to be intentional about, really thoughtful about this High Holy Days, is with whom are we praying and how is that going to work for us? These things won't just happen for us like it does in a normal year where we turn up and we are there with other people. There's a huge loss in that. One of the things I know I'm going to really miss these High Holy Days is seeing people who I only see twice a year, and actually having that connection with, where I've been involved in someone's life in a very deep way over the course of my rabbinic career, and I get to say hi to them a couple of times a year, and I'm going to miss that sense of connection. It's going to be a profound sense of loss. But in terms of our prayer life, the actual services themselves, we need to think about how we make it work with one another. So I think that's a really serious question for all of us, which is, does the experience of prayer work better if we're with other people or if we're not? And if it does, then with whom can we pray? That is, where might we invite ourselves, and who might we invite? We cannot shidduch people. We can't put people together. The risk associated with it organizationally is too strong, unfortunately. But we are really strongly encouraging people to look out for one another, if that is something that will enable people to have a more positive High Holy Day experience. But if we do that, we have to ask the question about how we make it work, because the risk is that you end up inviting someone for lunch, and you talk through tefillah, right? That risk that's associated with not having shared ground rules. So I think one of the things I would really recommend is, if you are going to be praying with people this High Holy Days with whom you do not normally pray, make sure that you have the conversation about what it's going to look like. Because we all know how annoying it is when someone is talking at us when we are praying, or talking next to us when we're praying, or looking on their phone when we're praying, because those of us who are regular prayers know that distraction can be very difficult. And as a community, we're used to having lots of people visit us and behave in ways that we're not used to. So we just need to be articulate and intentional about that. The ideal is that we are together but not distracting one another. That is, we're deeply aware that we're with other people, but we're not so aware that we're with other people that it's taking our focus off our shared focus of our prayer lives. And that also applies online as well. So online, we have to ask the question, what will help us to be aware of others without being distracted by them and without being a distraction to them? That is, how are we going to feel most in connection whilst also feeling safe, while also feeling not distracted? And I cannot answer those questions for you. I think, people have found different ways of doing it and different answers to that question. and I've, it's been very interesting to watch people move on to YouTube, move back from YouTube, people who what are online and visible, who choose not to be on to be seeable. I suppose what I would encourage all of you is to be intentional about it, to really think about the answers to those questions, so that it's not happening to you, but you are the actor, you are the being proactive and the agent of thinking about this stuff. And of course, we have different preferences. So, I am aware that there are people in our community, people in this call, who desperately love praying in a way that is not distracted and need to be on their own. And, people are in different rooms in the same house. And I also know that there are people who there is this wonderful moment of seeing a whole family sat together, praying together, holding hands with each other, being with each other. So I think both of those are really legitimate ways of approaching it. I think, again, what I would suggest is the importance of being intentional about it, having decided and thought about it together beforehand. And then for me, there's another thing, which is how do we articulate in what we are doing that we are in relationship with others, even though we're on our own. So for me, there's something about when we are all in tefillah together, we stand up together and sit down together. When we are disparate and separated in this way, we maybe don't have that same sense of acting together. But it is a remarkably profound thing for us to watch you stand when we are standing, to watch you bow when we are bowing, to watch you lighting candles when we are lighting candles. That thing of being in activity together, and to know that people are doing it even though they may have their cameras off, is also very powerful. And again, part of this is about how we orient ourselves. I would love it if to know that 3,000 people in our community are all facing east. For me, that would be an extraordinarily powerful knowledge to have, that everyone has oriented themselves. And we'll see there's a very strong kind of Jewish aspect to that as well. But, to orient ourselves in the same way, to not be facing in lots of different directions. And what that reflects, and then I'll stop again, is prayer needs to be an active, participative experience, even at home. So I think, I know it's really odd, and I know it can feel very strange to be joining in, participating and doing things as if you were in a room full of other people. But I really think it's the most important aspect of this. So, to prepare in advance the things you need to join in at key moments, candles, wine, apple and honey, to make sure you have a machzor so that you can follow along, but then to do so, to join in, to say amen, to read along, to sing along. It's really odd to sing on your own as if you're in shul at the beginning, but is extraordinarily important, I think, in making it feel grounded to do that. And next week's session is going to be with Kanta Tamara, thinking about how to do that in a way which feels good, how to harmonize those sorts of things so that you can really bring your own voice even though you're at home. And again, one of the things I think is really important is to stand up and sit down at the appropriate moments. I do think there is a sense of loss if we don't do that. And not just loss for ourselves, but also loss for those with whom we are in community. So especially if you're choosing to be on video, to actually choose to be seen as being part of community, not to separate yourself out from that by doing that stuff together. Because what we're trying to do by doing these things is to be community, be as if we are together, be as connected as we can be to each other, whilst also acknowledging that we are separate from each other, that we're in different spaces, and that's how we bring that of ourselves. And as I say, Cancer Tomorrow will spend some time next week thinking about how we can do that in practice, particularly bringing our voices. Again, I mean, it's not about me, but one of the things that early on was very sustaining in a very difficult time, very kind of replenishing, were those moments of seeing other people singing back even though I couldn't hear you. There was something deep, incredibly kind of replenishing about that experience of knowing that we were praying together even though we were separate from each other. Again, I will just pause for a minute and see how some of that feels and some of the observations that we might make as we move towards the end of this. Brenda.
I've been thinking about having a minion at home, but not sure quite how we do it and whether we do it following Zoom or whether we do our own service, whether it's okay to have 10 or 12 people or 6 or 8 people, or do we have to be 2 meters apart? Or, there's so many bits that I can't seem to connect with myself to decide whether it's a good idea or whether it's dangerous or we should do it or we shouldn't do it. But we have discussed it around. If we could be sure it was nice weather, we could do it outside. But as we don't know it's going to be nice weather, it'll have to be inside. Do we have to leave all the doors open and freeze? Or can we have it, what do you think about that? Would we follow your service or would we make our own service? In which case you'd have to help us a bit because we wouldn't be able to do it all. Confusion.
Right. So, I think one of the things to say is if you weren't with us, I'd miss you. Which is not a glib thing, but actually there is something very. I think one of the things is we are all see each other and are seen by each other. That's a very powerful statement that we make together. Though I also recognise that, particularly at the Yamim Noraim, this feels artificial, strange, like disconnecting in a different kind of way, and actually might just feel wrong in some strange way. So I can't answer those questions for you. I think the advice at the moment is incredibly confusing about what you can do and what you can't do. And I think it's really very challenging for us to know how best to advise you on this stuff. And also to know whether or not we're being unnecessarily cautious about some of these things, So I've been in a few calls with a professor from Public Health England who has been kind of allocated to us, the Reform and Liberal movements, as our kind of guide in some of these conversations. What's clear to me is, A, that they don't really know either, which is why it's confusing. That they're finding this stuff out because this is a new thing. But essentially what he said is outside is fine, inside is more dangerous. Distance is good, and 2 meters is better than 1 meter. And that if you have spaces which are not well ventilated, you should try not to use them. And obviously for us as a community, that is perhaps our biggest challenge because our Beit Tefillah has next to no ventilation, which does make it an incredibly difficult place for us to reopen in October, November, when the weather will demand it of us. We will help you in any way that you need. I hope you know that. So if you decide that you're going to be a minyan on your own, then we will help you. If you want to find a way of zooming into us whilst being a community, then we can think together about how well that will work. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. I mean,
That's okay. That's fine. Sort of confirm what we're thinking, really.
Cool. John and then Gail, I think was the order.
Josh, interesting. One observation on being in a group is your ability to chant or sing loudly. I mean, one thing I've done in participating on Zoom all the way through is to participate loudly and actively, probably even louder if I've been in shul. I went to Shacharit in the sukkah on Monday, and the strangest thing for me to be asked is either not to sing or to sing close into myself. And actually, I found it, after a while, enjoyable, but I don't know if other people who were there can give me. I felt it rather containing. And I've been used to actually expressing myself over the last couple of months. And I think that if I was in a minyan or a bigger group on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, I'd feel constrained because I want to sing. So
Right. So the evidence is still unclear around singing. We were hoping that the research projects from Public Health England would have been released by now with a bit more information. As things currently stand, the advice from the government, the official advice from the government, is that congregational singing is not permitted. However, choirs can now sing together, both inside and outside, as long as they are 2 meters apart from one another. So if you all decide that you're going to form a choir when you get together, Brenda, if you decide to all meet and then you say you're a choir, you're then permitted to sing. But if you're not a choir, you're not permitted to sing, whether you're a professional choir or a non-professional choir.
Do we need to sign a pledge?
I'm not quite sure how it works legally. The United Synagogue have had private advice that congregational singing outside is okay, but that private advice has not found its way into the public documentation yet. So, as you may know, those who've attended one of our tefillot in the sukkah, what we have said is that volume seems to be relevant, that we can't tell you not to sing because it's not clear that that's the best advice, but singing loudly will mean that we have to stop the service. And it was a very odd experience to have to stop tefillah one morning and ask people to sing less loudly. I've never had to do that before. It was very countercultural for me. But that's where we are. I mean, I think if you want to sing loudly, you can't do that in public right now, as things stand. By the way, shofar is also incredibly complicated. It's not clear. As far as I can tell, government guidelines seems to be following the requirements of the Office of the Chief Rabbi, who has rather more clout than we do, in trying to persuade them to change the language to help the Jewish community. Barriers seem to be important, though. Over the last week or so, they've started to say maybe we shouldn't have just invested thousands of pounds in plexiglass screens for Aleph. So, this stuff is also new and unknown, because it's new and unknown, unfortunately. But yeah, if you want to sing loud, singing loud is something that has to happen on your own or with people you love or live with. Gail. I unfortunately can't unmute you, Gail. I don't have the power on this occasion.
There
we
okay.
go.
So may I make a suggestion for people who are on their own? And I get this idea from, you need to have a telephone as well as the iPad, so that then you listen on your iPad, but then you speak, but you're with the service with the person who you're on the phone to. So if you've got iPhones, then you use WhatsApp. Now I know this because Mike plays back up that way. He plays on the one iPad, and then on the phone he talks to his opponent at the same time. And it's worked totally brilliantly, because the program he's got doesn't allow the person to talk. So it's a silent program when you play. And it's a bit like ours, because really we can't speak on this medium. Mm-hmm. Just a suggestion.
Right. And I think what it speaks to is the very social nature of our prayer lives, right? That actually, that thing of leaning over to the person next to you and saying, hello, or I can't believe he just said that, or whatever it might be, is a very powerful part of our prayer lives. And we need to, again, I think the big message for me is that we need to be as intentional as we can be in how we approach this very odd and artificial year in our prayer lives. And it won't be the same, and it can't be the same, and it's not precedent setting. Nothing's going to be, a year from now, please God, we will be back in a marquee in the Stomach Centre grounds with our tefillah as it should be. or something similar. But, you know, we have to live through the year that we've got and be as intentional about that as we can be. Miriam, you wanted to, and then David.
Hello, thank you very much. This was helpful. I feel to some extent you sort of set out your stall of what you want from us. And I feel amongst friends, it's safe. Perhaps I can offer a view about what would be helpful for me. It is what it is. You know, we've been in this situation for many months now, and it seems that you want to name the loss and the pain and actually I think we're beyond that. You know, and I understand, you know, as you well know, you know, my daughter has been alone leading services from her flat for 5 months. And I understand in terms of for Shlichim Tzibur, it's really hard. But for me, what I would like from my spiritual leaders is to lift me up and to give me as joyous and positive experience of the Chagim as possible. And so I feel to sort of lay on this is once in a, you know, generation and it's the loss and the pain and the, you know, I'm not sure it actually needs to be named. We all know where we are and have been for many months. And even for those members of the community who perhaps haven't been with us along this way and will turn up, does it really, I'd be interested to know what other people think. Does all that really need spelling out, or really is the task to give us as beautiful experience of tefillah as we can manage with the limitations of how we can do it? I just feel, you know, as soon as I hear the kind of, oh, this is so hard, and it's like, oh. So I just wanted to put that out there.
So I kind of take that last bit as read, actually. We will be doing the very best tefillah that we possibly can, as wonderful and joyful and musical as we can, as we have for 6 months, as we have for the 10 years before that, and the 12 years before that, because that's the given. I think there is something different this year, Miriam. I think the different thing this year is it's not enough to come and simply attend, which often it has been. I promise you, you will not have the joyful experience that you want if you are not also intentional about it, if you don't also bring a different heart into it. And I think part of that is about naming the challenge and naming the loss. That shouldn't overwhelm us, and it doesn't overwhelm us. And actually, I think the tefillah of the last few weeks has been kind of joyful as we've begun the journey out from Tisha B'Av, and really actively thought, how can we have the prayer, this joyful prayer life moving up to the high holidays? I mean, we've certainly tried to do that, and it will be of the very best quality that it can be. But this requires a different kind of it's a different religious task. It's just a different religious task to the normal religious task, where it's enough to come and be carried by others. You're going to have to, there is work to do for all of us alongside that. And that's all I am saying. And for me, part of that is about naming the reality, naming the joy, naming the stuff we can still do, but also naming the reality, which is this is not the same. And that's okay. David, and then we'll open it up for more.
Yes, I've been very lucky because leading both the Sunday morning Shacharit and sharing with Mike, but leading sometimes the Wednesday evening Mariv. I've been lucky that I've been leading services in the case of Sunday morning with perhaps 15, 16 people in, and Wednesday evenings with perhaps 5 or 6. But with the Sunday Shacharit, what I think has made us a community and kept us together as a community is that I bring in lots of other people to the service. So Karon will do Hallelujah and Adana, or mainly because she's the only person with a nice voice. Or Brenda's Baruch Hu. And Anne will say the prayer for healing, and Jeremy will blow the shofar. So I've been able, with the smaller groups of 15, to bring folks into the service, and that has really felt like a community because people have participated. And I think it's one of the struggles, one of the problems that you have on a Shabbat or is that you're dealing with very big numbers. But I think bringing in other voices does make for more community. That was my first point. And also on the Wednesday evenings where we've had people from Harlow and Devon, is beforehand I really make an effort to find out where people have come from. And we have a little bit of a natter about how on earth can you be Jewish in Devon and Southport and places like that. So there's more opportunity for nattering. The second point I want to make is I think you're very harsh on slouching. I slouch in shul, I slide down on those chairs, and I'm a natural sloucher. So let's hear it for the slouchers, please.
Okay. Look, for me, the power of this is so different to one of my learnings is anything bigger than a screen is a whole different experience. Anytime when you can't see everybody you're in conversation with. So those small experiences have been really something to celebrate. I think things like, for me, things like Imre Finu services where we've had small screens and we can do the interaction and talk to each other and sing together and really do Kaddish as well, where we can really allow people who are in mourning. And the more we can do some of these in-person services, the more we can also do that. I think, again, a little plug for that to really, those are really restorative, I think, in terms of a way of balancing some of this challenge together. I saw someone, Joe, I think, wanted to speak, and then
yes,
and then we should start moving towards the end.
Okay. I will be blowing the shofar, and Brenda and Philip will hear it.
Right. And Justin will be playing guitar in his house along with that. Like, I think there is that thing of bringing that thing of joining and participating, which makes such a difference and does allow us to interact with each other in different ways. Karan.
So I want to say thank you, because what this has done is made me realize that we're not beyond that. We're not beyond this. I feel a bit like we're in exile at the moment. That's where I am anyway. And I think that the focus for tonight in Elul, which is after all the month of preparation, is more important than ever, is trying to get yourself into the right frame of mind. I would normally do it by going to lots of choir rehearsals over the summer and singing with a group of people who become my community, my mini community within a community. So I think it's been really important to name where we are and to look forward to what I know will be joyful, but with intention.
Thank you. Nolene, I think.
Thanks, Josh. So I think I might be, slightly different in terms of, I feel very much that we're a community, and those of us who are sitting on the screen tonight are intentional about our prayer lives. But I know there are loads of people who are going to come to these high holy days without a clue in the world. And I have friends who are those people. And I just feel, maybe we can help them too, to be intentional about that. And actually, as a community, really say to people, this is, think about this, or maybe do one little special thing. Because actually, otherwise, it really is going to feel like watching Netflix for a lot of people. And they will go away from the high holy days without an ounce of what they have normally, coming to the tent or coming to Aleph or being in a big bang. So, that would be my request as a communal person who's really engaged with prayer. And I think we can help small groups of people. So if you talk about those small groups, Josh, that's the moment to do it. How much we get out of that. And by each of us helping a small group, we can really make a difference. And then I just did want to add that I am in the position where I know very much what it feels like for the clergy to lead in an empty synagogue. And I was chatting to someone, and I think we should recognize how hard that must be to stand there. And although, you know, Josh, you speak passionately about seeing it on the screen, and I know Hannah and Tamara also feel very much seeing it on the screen is very restorative and nourishing, but it cannot be easy being there. And by us being intentional and recognizing that, and you know, that moment you said, if we're all facing east, what that would do for you, I think that's really important that we share that and that people understand and recognize that. And I just wanted to acknowledge it.
Thank you. So I think the Hi Ho Day experience we're going to have is amazing. So I'm really proud of the program that we put together, that you'll start receiving from us on Thursday. Some of the creativity that we've been able to have, some of the ways of thinking about what our prayer life is going to look like over this month. My biggest worry isn't anyone on this screen who is actually going to open the email and read it, who's going to watch the videos, who's going to open the letter when it comes. So I think it's really about encouraging people to engage with it in a different way. I think that's what, and I think this is part of it, this journey that we're on together, of trying to be aware of what you know, that we have to really think about it this year. Normally the Hi Ho Days is a thing that we come to. This is a thing that we have to bring ourselves into. It's a very different kind of a year this year. And I think that, you know, it is kind of, that has a kind of reciprocity in a different kind of way to maybe in previous years. Could you just wave I know Henry wants to speak. Does anyone else want to speak? And then I want to do a little bit of the Jewish to finish. Henry.
Well, I think ALIS services on Zoom have been great. I've been to quite a number of others, and I always come back to ALIS and think that there isn't any real competition. And so I'm looking forward to the high holidays and what you have to offer. Can I make respectfully a small suggestion about the sound quality? I know that the equipment in shul may not be the very best, and I know that YouTube offers better sound, but then you wouldn't like us all to disappear to YouTube because you wouldn't see us. So a lot of us like to be on Zoom because, you know, we do feel more part of it that way. And one of the things that I have noticed as a recipient is that the sound floats in and out. And one of the reasons for that is that the clergy sometimes move away from the fixed microphone, move from side to side, and that does make a difference. Other synagogues where the clergy are looking straight ahead, not moving, smiling, making facial signs of recognition, it somehow works better. So if you could just bear that in mind, please.
Okay. Thank you for saying what you said, Henry. I'm really grateful. We are investing heavily in our tech for this High Holy Days. I'll give you a little glimpse of what you're going to get from us on Thursday. There are going to be 4 different studios set up in Aelith through the High Ho Days for different tracks of what we're offering. Throughout the High Ho Days, there'll be what we're calling our heart space, our heart service, which is our kind of core service that will be running throughout, and then various other services for the soul, for the mind, for the body, for the family, being delivered from different bits of the shul. So our normal kind of really ambitious range of activity, as well as some extra little treats, our Tashlich treasure hunt for those who want to go on that on Rosh Hashanah afternoon, and Yom Kippur afternoon. We're all going to take a break for a walk. We're preparing a podcast with the choir for those who want to go on a Yom Kippur afternoon walk. So there are going to be things that we're going to do which are special for this year as well. We are working always on the technology. So one of the things to be aware of is that those standing mics aren't on anymore. We're using lapel mics and guitars and guitar mics, plug-in mics as much as we can, partly because I'm a mover. I'm a mover. I always admired Alex Wright, who was just so still in tefillah, and I can't be still like Alex in that way. But also because the sound quality from those standing mics is not good enough. But we are investing heavily in that tech for this, working with like professional tech support for this particular year. So I
you.
hope it will be better, Henry. If it clearly correlates to me moving, then send me an email to tell me off. I just want to share some kind of 3 sort of Jewish thoughts, textual thoughts, because it won't be a me session if we don't have text in it. To just hang this on some of our textual tradition. So first, this idea of space, the importance of physical space, is not a new one. Vasuli mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham. There in the core of our text, our foundational text, is this idea that there's a connection between the physical space that we build and God's ability to dwell with us. And, so our challenge is, how do we make sure that our homes are capable of being a sanctuary, capable of allowing God's presence to dwell with us? And of course, it's not just about our homes, it's also about the way that we engage. So I'm doing the Elul half hour on Saturday morning, when I will be talking about my go-to God concept, which is the concept of Shekhinah, and the idea that we are responsible for whether or not God is capable of dwelling among us. That God's immanence is up to us to some extent, and there is a foundational text that can help us. This idea that afilu echad sheyoshev v'osek b'torah sheshchina imo, even someone who sits on their own, if they're engaging with Torah, the Shekhinah is with them. We can do this. Anthony on his own at the end of the phone line is not on his own, because by being present with us, he invites the Shekhinah and makes space for Shekhinah to be in that space with him. And that even when we are in different places, one of our ideals is that we are together still. So why do we all face east or towards Jerusalem when we pray? The idea is not that it's about honoring Jerusalem in particular. That's not the idea that's articulated in the Talmud. The reason the Talmud tells us is Kol Yisrael mechavnin et libam lemakom echad. All Israel should direct their hearts towards one place. And I think what I would hope that we can do is, through these high ho days, Kol Elith Mechavnin, all of Elith can direct our hearts towards one place and feel that sense of being part of one people directing our hearts together, even though this year we're not able to be physically together, that we're going to be separate. Thank you for being with me for just over an hour to think about this stuff together. This PowerPoint is going to go online over the next couple of days. As we build our resources, we're building resources to go with this. One of the things that I'm working on, as I said, is a kavanah to begin to feel out when we're sitting at home, and maybe some other resources for us as well as we make that step in. We will absolutely do our bit to create the most creative, thoughtful, diverse, engaging tefillah that we possibly can these high days. Every sermon speaking to our moment, every study session, the normal quality that we would expect and hope it would be, the music as good as we can make it, the Torah reading by members of the community from their homes, study passages, haftarot, community prayers being read from people's homes as much as possible. But I think to really make this Saiho Days work, it's going to need all of us to engage in it in a slightly different way this year. Thank you for being with us. I will hopefully see some of you for Elul half hour. I'm there I can't remember who it is on Friday nights, but Elliot on Friday nights. If you haven't had a chance to study with Elliot, please do, because he's great. And I'm on Saturday morning, and then please do join Cantor Tamara for the session next Tuesday about singing at home. Bye.
Josh.
Josh, you need to, at the top left, press stop stream, live stream.